everyone, and welcome back to another edition of the SBK Betting Podcast. We are now just under a week since the end of Royal Ascot 2023 and a marathon week. So much racing. Ross and TC guided you through the highlights and previewed every single day. And I think now we can sort of have a moment to reflect on the good, the bad, the ugly. There was so much to take away from it. It was quite a punishing week in some respects from a betting angle. Some good days, some bad days, but in general, the handicaps were a lottery, and we saw some extraordinary payouts and big prices, especially in the 2-year-old races, which is where I'll start. Ross, TC, I think we can both agree that it wasn't the easiest meeting to judge. And Ross, as a fan of the juveniles, I say you were, some of them, quite impressed, mesmerized, especially from the Adrian Murray 2-year-old that went and won it 150 to 1. The American winner, TC, I don't know if we necessarily saw that coming of all of them, but Ross, to start with you, what really stuck out from the week and what are your big takeaways?
My big takeaways was it was a painful week. I mean, River Tiber got me off to a really good start in the Coventry. I was confident on him, and I thought, I think I might have been following this closely enough. Relief Rally was ever so painful. I tipped her in the juvenile watch piece on Racing TV. I still believe she was the best horse in the race, and probably just a bit unlucky. And it went downhill from there, really. But I don't think you can knock any of the form lines. I mean, it'd have been really nice to know that Michael Appleby's horse was working with his placed Group 1 sprinter in the run up to it, Big Evs. I mean, there was that's information you'd have killed for, but there was no fluke about Big Evs being there. I think they're a really decent bunch of juveniles. I just got 2 eye catchers I wrote about earlier in the week. I thought in the Windsor Castle Stakes, Alabama finished a long way in front of the group on the far side. That wasn't the place you wanted to be. Got off to a slow start as well, and I think is progressing with racing. So Alabama would be one that I'd be keen to keep on side there. And then in the Chesham on the last day, Golden Mines just got no run whatsoever. Had to wait for the gap to open, and then when the gap did open, finished really well under Oshinor. I think he's a smart colt in the making, and he should win prizes later this year.
Yeah, there is certainly, especially from watching it, a draw by a sense. One day it was one side, one day it was near side. I thought Highfield Princess on the Saturday was really unlucky to be on her own on the near side, and it was one of those days. And I actually think Richard Fahey made a really good point about the amount of 2-year-olds in a race and having to be left in the stalls for a long time. That can ruin a horse's chances. And I think there's probably a lot of learnings to take away. There's obviously the bans that have been applied to the jockeys for whip rulings. Frankie Dettori's now not going to be able to ride in the July Cup, as is Oisin Murphy. But all that aside, TC, we did see, I think we kind of humbled by a couple of them. Mustard Af, I didn't see that coming. I think we've got to give him a lot more respect than we should do, and we have done. That race, I don't think we'll ever be able to work out the Prince of Wales. What do you think from the internationals' point of view? I think Crimson Advocate winning was good for racing because there's so much support comes internationally, and it was probably good that the support they give the meeting is reflected in the results, and it means that we'll get Royal Ascot's going to be well supported and very competitive for years to come.
Yeah, we need those international winners. As you say, it provides that extra angle that we might not get any other festival during the summer. And the fact that Crimson Advocate got the job done for George Weaver and very enthusiastic owners was phenomenal. Not only just for myself, who loves US racing, but just for the neutral or even people who are watching Ascot for the first time, just to see their enthusiasm and buzz about bringing their horse across and winning on the biggest stage. I thought it was a very difficult punting week. Akita Sushi got me out of serious trouble in the Duke of Edinburgh on Friday. Without him winning, I think I probably wouldn't be sat right here right now. But we move on. We get into this week's action.
Don't be hard on yourself. Don't forget what the level of form that you came into. So for your sake, the high level standards is a bit like George Bowie coming into Royal Ascot expecting 5 winners and having to leave without any and losing a load of horses, which is not ideal, but it can happen. It's just like you give yourself such a high level of wanting to produce winners, and it just goes to show how tricky that meeting is. But as we say, we move on to some more competitive weekend action. But we have excitingly got a new SBK feature. Same Race ACCA is now live. It's just basically a horse racing bet builder. And for example, you can pick 2 or 3 horses to come in the top 3 of the Northumberland Plate as a double or a treble, which Ross and TC and myself are going to do. So a bit of fun. If you bet £10 on the Same Race ACCA, you get a £10 free bet to use on horse racing. T's and C's are in the description on the app, but a lot of fun for this weekend. So as I said, we're going to get into the Same Race ACCA from TC and Ross and my perspective, but let's go through the race. First of all, the Northumberland Plate over the years has been a fascinating race. We obviously saw one of the training performances of recent times with Trushan landing it off a massive weight for Holly Doyle and Alan King last year, and this year we've got a much more open feel to it. I don't think there's a standout from a horse perspective. There isn't something that's a clear Group 1 horse like that in a handicap, but we do have horses that merit a lot of respect, and Post Impressionist has to be one of them. He heads the market, and it's sort of 5-1 at least the field, and then you've got some sort of really dour stayers in behind from Post Impressionist, who's the kind of unexposed horse. And if I'm rightly or wrongly, I don't know if I this right to say, TC, but was he not touted for this race last year, and he didn't come into it? I don't know what happened to him. He's definitely been plotted as a kind of horse that has got a big race in his armory, but this is going to be a big ask after 267 days off the track, as much of a genius William Haggas is.
Yeah, he is a genius, and I am siding with Post Impressionist. So maybe I'm going to be very pro the fact he's coming off the layoff and using this as a ploy to, run him off a nice handicap mark rather than cons. I can see the cons about him: the layoff, the fact he hasn't really faced this kind of field apart from at Royal Ascot last year, where he got completely stuffed, and the fact he's drawn in 19 of 20. They're obviously the cons. However, I think the layoff is perfectly fine. I like the ploy to come back into the Northumberland Plate first up. I think that suggests that William Haggas believes he's a much better horse than this level. Normally, you'd give a horse a prep run to make sure they're 100%, but with him, maybe they don't think they need to. I also like the draw in 19 because although there is a reasonably short run into the first bend, when you're wide, you can come across and slot into a position, whereas when you're drawn on the inside in a huge field, if you don't break well, you're likely to get shuffled back or short of room. So I like the draw. And long-term viewers of this podcast will know that I have an affinity for Post Impressionist because I put this horse up 3 times last year and he didn't reward me once, including when he was my nap at Beverley at about 5-6 and he lost. However, ever since his novice runs, he has shown that he's got the ability to develop into a nice prospect. Finally, last year, on his final start, he won at York, and that kind of proved that he can make up into the prospect everyone thought he could be. And I think that was due to the fact that William Haggas upped him in trip to 1 mile and 6 furlongs. So the extra distance in the Northumberland Plate should pay to his advantage. And if you just look back at his only run at Newcastle, he finished second behind subsequent Group 1 winner Eldar Eldarov. He wasn't beaten too far, and he had a worse run in the race. I think you can mark up that performance. Obviously, Eldar Eldarov wasn't a Group 1 horse when winning that maiden, but it was still a good effort. William Haggas hasn't had a runner in the Northumberland Plate for 10 years. Again, another interesting stat, suggesting he doesn't love the race, but he thinks this horse is perfect for it. And he has a 32% strike rate at Newcastle in his career, 30% strike rate just in the last 5 years alone. So I think this entry of Post Impressionist is by far the most interesting in the whole race, and I've got to side with him, Jess.
Yeah, he's got 2 runners in the race as well. Nathaniel Green, who Post Impressionist has put to one side quite comfortably last time. That's a really interesting stat indeed. And his pedigree suggests he's close related to the Cesarewitch winner Grimetti, that he should be all right at the trip. A weight of 9 stone, 4-year-olds. Have you got any stats on runners' age? Age winners? I can see you smirking. I don't know if I've just given you a bit of a trap there, but is the fact that he's unexposed might make him a bit vulnerable age-wise?
No, I like that, because if you've got the older horses, albeit Trucham was an older horse who won last year, we knew he was miles better than this quality. But generally, older horses are, exposed, and therefore we know they're running roughly at the level they should be running at. 4-year-olds in this race, I don't have the stat, but I do know that Caravan of Hope won it back in 2020 as a 4-year-old. I like the unexposed horse coming in, the horse that could be the group performer and not a handicap performer.
Brilliant. Yeah, I see it as well. There was another winner, Antiquary. I'm just looking at the last winners. Was a 4-year-old too, but a lot of 5-year-olds too. So I would imagine that it's nothing to get too concerned about. Okay, that's just ruling out any concerns. TCs with Post Impressionist. We'll get your additional to make a bit of fun for our ACCA in a bit. But Ross, what are your thoughts about this horse, Post Impressionist? Is it a good plot job sort of laid out from William Haggis? You know that they are very good at race planning. They always have something in their mind, and they very rarely struggle to pull things like this off. But do you think there's something that might have that race fitness that would just make it tough for him?
I just think in a staying handicap or a staying race of any nature, a little bit of race experience and racecraft and just that bit of fitness that you just, no matter how much you do, you can't put on at home, doesn't go amiss. I absolutely see the appeal, but in such a big field, he was just short enough for me. I need to provocate this by saying this isn't a race that has particularly been on my radar over the years, and Liam, who's producing, is probably going to mute me now because it is his race. But having looked at it, I did like a William Haggis horse, but it was Nathaniel Green, and I take on board what you said, that he was put away quite nicely by his other runner last time. But ever since this horse won over 1 mile and 6 at Haydock last summer, where he got carried across the track, he did all his best work inside the last half furlong. I've been dying to see him over further and see him in these staying contests, and he hasn't. He's run over the same trip. He's run over 1.5 miles. I think he's got some nice form in his book, and I think he's open to plenty of improvement over this trip. I mean, when he won at Haydock, he beat Giavoletto, who's won a Group 2 at York since. Okay, there was a disparity in the weights, but it's still a class horse you're beating. He's handled Your Weather as far as you can see. He's had one start on Your Weather on just his second start, and he ran perfectly adequately, so there doesn't seem to be any problem there. He does seem better with a bit of cut in the ground, which normally suggests a horse would not mind Your Weather surface. And I thought his fourth last time at Goodwood was a decent effort. He was staying on, behind the eventual Ascot Gold Cup winner, again getting lumps of weight, but even so, it wasn't the worst race in the world. Agagio in second is a good horse as well. And so my selection with him is really built around the fact I think he's got loads and loads more to give up in trip. I think he's fundamentally quite a lazy horse. Takes a while to wind up in the straight. Got a nice draw in 11, so as TC said, they've got options. They'll be able to break and then ride how they want to ride. So I'm keen on him. And then with my same race, ACCA, another horse that has got to be on the radar is Golden Rules. Made a really impressive at Kempton after 638 days off. Won very comfortably, and it was a really good ride by Oisin Murphy. He dictated it from the front and ran his race his own fractions. But this horse was not in any way fully extended. And when they were closing to him with a furlong to go, he found plenty more under minimal driving, I thought. He's a smart horse. He was fourth in the Ascot Stakes when with John Gosden, off just £1 lower than this. He's only up £3 for that Kempton win, which I thought was pretty generous. He's actually trained in Monmouthshire, where I used to be based, by Deborah and her son Tom Faulkner. I know Tom a little bit from my point-to-pointing days. Tom was a really good point-to-point jockey and a really good point-to-point trainer in our area. And I spoke to him this morning. Picked up for just 6,000 at Newmarket, and they were looking to try and buy a horse to go and win a little novice hurdle. Got him home. He was very buzzy. They've got a swimming pool at Devon. They've got a really nice setup. They've swum him loads, so that's helped him relax. They were looking to go and win a little novice hurdle at Newbury in February. Ground was too firm, couldn't go, and so they gave him a spin on the all weather, and then they said it was really all systems for the week after the win at Kempton were geared to going back to Ascot to run in that Ascot Stakes. And then they just considered he's a big horse, 17 hands. They weren't overly sure about the ground. Given his buzzy nature, they don't want to prep him for a race and then not run. this is worth twice as much as the Ascot Stakes. So decision was made quite early on to keep him back, train him for this. He's going to go there a fresh horse. They're pretty confident they're travelling up today. And it's just a nice story. I mean, Gareth Cheshire, the owner, is, if you go on their Facebook, he's in the yard sweeping and brushing and carrying buckets. It's a proper team effort. And I think he's a really smart horse for a stallion in Golden Horn who is doing good things this year. I love him. You won't find a bad looking horse by Golden Horn, that's for sure. So yeah, I'm really keen on him.
Yeah, I love this story. £6,000, A for a Golden Horn from the family of Shakita. Ex-John and Thady Gosden obviously had issues, must some sort of niggle of some sort that kept him off for so long. And to come back and to retain Oisin Murphy as well, because Andrew Balding has got Berkshire Rocco in the field, but he's allowed his jockey to keep on golden rules for this race. It's a wonderful story. All the best to them as they mix it with a horse that they bought for such a small amount, and they've sort of nursed back to this this standard, this level, to have a really good crack at the Northumberland Plate. I love it. And yeah,
Oisin has been in twice since Kempton to ride this horse. Now, he's a man in demand. That says that he clearly thinks this is a horse worth bothering with.
Oh, totally. And it's not an easy journey from Lambourne all the way to Monmouthshire just to have a sit on where he could be all over the place. But that's definitely a confidence boost. He's the storyline, but he's also not just the storyline. He's also got a cracking chance in this race. So best of luck to all the connections of Golden Rules, horse 10 for Ross Miller in the Northumberland Plate. I will myself gonna stick with a horse that I really do have a bit of a soft spot for, and I fancied him at Royal Ascot last week at Zoffy, who I think just didn't quite stay out. He's done this before. Hugo Palmer run him in 2.5 mile races, and I just don't think he gets the trip. I think he's an out and out two miler, 2.5 specialist, as we saw when he was second at Chester in the Chester Cup. He ran a big race. He's far higher, is £11 higher in the handicap to his last win, but I think he's proved that he can win or be competitive off this rating, even though, this time last year when he won at Newcastle, he won off 84, winning the Northumberland Vars. It's quite a quick turnaround, but he ran a big race, just got tired late on. Hugo Palmer knows how to win this race, and I think that he has got a cracking chance. And again, well drawn in 16, that's where you want to be. I think he can be really competitive. Ross has already let us know of his ACCA play. I'll give TC the floor first before I come back to me and add to it. What's going to be in your same race ACCA to add to what you've already got here with Post Impressionist?
Yeah, I'm going to include Post Impressionist to win in the same race ACCA, as well as 2 to finish in the top 5 horses. First is going to be Roginski, who's finished 4th and 3rd in the last 2 editions of this race. This has been his target, super consistent, loves the track and the trip, so he's got to go in there to finish in the top 5. And the other one is Omniscient, also to finish in the top 5. Samart Prescott last year laid out a horse for this race, didn't pan out, but I think he finished 6th or 5th, and Omniscient looks very much of the same mould. So I'll have Post Impressionist to win, Roginski to finish top 5, Omniscient to finish top 5 for my same race ACCA.
Okay, brilliant. And we heard from Ross. Myself, I'm going to add Rainbow Dreamer to Zoffy, a horse that's, although he's a 10-year-old now, he's sort of defying his age. He's a horse that is kept to the all-weather. He's got a brilliant record on it as well. And he showed last time out when he won at Newcastle at this track in the all-weather marathon championship. And he was a big price that day. I don't think that was any fluke at all. He kind of can go under the radar. He's got a big enough weight, but he's a horse that I think in this kind of ACCA situation, you've got to feel like he could be up there in at least in the first 5. So I'm happy to add Rainbow Dreamer with Zoffy, 2 sort of out and out competitive handicap stayers in a race that it could be some fly in the ointments, especially with Ross's selection, Golden Rules, and also Post Impressionist. Those sort of less exposed stayers in this field. Really good looking Northumberland Plate, I think we can agree. But from that, we're going to move on to what else we've got, because I feel like this first weekend of July is the first weekend where it sets the tone for madness on a Saturday. There are how many race meetings across the UK and Ireland? Too many, probably. It's difficult to follow it all, probably not for the right reasons. Obviously, the Irish Derby is on Sunday as well. We're going to have a quick look at that before we're going to get naps the next best, because I think it would be remiss of us to kind of brush aside the fact that Auguste Rodin is going to be back on Sunday, especially after the way the Derby form's working out. They will be licking their lips at Ballydoyle to see that Waiparo's come out and won well, and obviously King Steel, who was second to him, was very impressive and looked like a real monster at Royal Ascot. So all the signals are right from a form perspective. Now he's got to go and do it on his home track, and quite surprisingly, give Ryan Moore his first Irish Derby winner, which is not currently in his CV. Ross, do you think it's quite a straightforward looking Irish Derby for Auguste Rodin? He's obviously got Spruwell in there. We don't have the confirmations at this stage, but in a race which is not been massively over-inspiring in the years, I think it's good for the race that Auguste Rodin is looking to do the double.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it should be straightforward. As long as you factor in he is flesh and blood, he's not a machine. And as such, things can go wrong. But yeah, I think, he's going to have had a more straightforward prep into this than he did to Epsom, really, after the Guineas. So yeah, I think the only negative is the fact that Ryan Moore hasn't won an Irish Derby, and Ryan Moore is only without an Irish Derby through misfortune, not through lack of talent. So there's no worries there. So I think he wins it. It's not a race I'd have a bet, and I don't see how Sprewell or White Birch can reverse the form. If I had a free bet and was pushed for selection, I would suggest up and under each way. He made a nice late 2-year-old debut. Looked very much like he was just there to get experience on the track, and has run really well in 2 starts this year in the Ballysacks, second behind White Birch. He was hampered, so he arguably could have been close, only beaten half a length. And in the Derby trial next time, he was a little bit further behind Sprewell, but he came from a long way back. Sprewell was more prominent in that race, just given the disparity in the prices at the moment. If you were going to try and look for a value selection, it would be him. But it's a race I'll watch and not partake in.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think you've got to be, when we weren't that confident with Auguste Rodin in our Epsom Derby, you've got to take the confidence of what he showed, that this horse is the real deal now. Just trying to think back and look back on why Ryan Moore might have been for whatever reason, not being on an Irish Derby winner. I don't think there's anything to worry about too much. Like looking at his stats, TC, at the Curragh, it's his, from all the Irish tracks, it's his most successful. He's got 28% strike rate there. He's had 128 winners from 468 runners. So it's not like he can't ride the track. It's pretty straightforward, especially compared to Epsom. So I think that's just it's kind of a bit of a meaningless point, really.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, Ryan was on Wings of Eagles back in 2017 and Capri won for Aidan O'Brien. He was on Anthony Van Dyke in 2019 when Sovereign won from the front in a ridiculous circumstances. They let him go 15, 20 lengths clear and couldn't peg him back. And then in 2020 when Santiago won, I don't think Ryan rode in the race. So it probably just is a bit of coincidence. Aidan O'Brien's won 14 Irish Derbies. Ryan Moore's going to chalk one up this Sunday, I believe. I'm not a fan of losing money. No one is, right? So opposing Auguste Rodin would be pointless because he looks very much likely to win the race. And I would just emulate everything Ross says. I think if you're going to have a bet, then it's probably up and under to place or in the each way market, just because he hasn't been beaten far by White Birch and Sprewell, and he's only had 3 starts, so could come on for those efforts. Whereas those 2 horses went to Epsom, they might be just tipping over the edge now, having been fully primed for the Derby, and up and under is a much bigger price. So if you were to have a bet in the race, it will be him, but I'd just rather watch Auguste Rodin win.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think it could cut up a bit. We don't know how many are going to be declared. I think it needs to be an each way betting heat for more than 7 runners to get too interested from a betting perspective. I am interested. I'm lucky enough that I'm going to be there on Sunday. I'm looking forward to seeing Knight to King, A, in the flesh, and B, to see how he runs. It's just going to be his second run. He put up a big display in his maiden at Gorham Park earlier on in June, and Dermot Weld is opting to give him a quite a tough test on his second start, but he is a half brother to Gaieth. He is beautifully bred. He could be a could be a very good horse. He might just need the experience, obviously, but it's nice to have a horse of a kind of unknown quality in the race. So Knight to King, just at an each way price. I wouldn't want anything too short, under 10-1 or so for him. But as the guys say, very much probably to be chasing home Auguste Rodin in the Irish Derby, part of the Irish Derby Festival, which starts on Friday, goes on until Sunday. So we could be picking from the Curragh Racing for Naps and Next Best, or we could be picking from Newmarket, from Newcastle, from Chester, from Windsor. I don't know where it will be, unless there's a jumps meeting that Ross has found. There probably is one dug in there as well. But we'll start with TC first. Let's go with your Nap and Next Best from this busy weekend.
Yeah, although there's lots of racing, I thought it was very competitive and hard to actually find confident selections. My nap is going to be Malacana in the 4:52 at Chester. This 5-year-old mare is best described as scrappy. Whenever she gets in a fight, she always seems to come out on top, and therefore she has a very nice, prolific strike rate of 7 from 20 in her career. Last year, she developed into a good performer over hurdles. She racked up a hat-trick in the early part of the year, including a Grade 3 at Cheltenham, before having a break, coming back on the flat and winning a couple of competitive handicaps in the back end of the year at Ascot and Newmarket, 2 proper tracks which generally feature good fields. Her flat campaign this year has only just began. She ran at Chester 14 days ago, and I thought she was extremely luckless then. She was just about to make her move around the inside on the turn and just had no room whatsoever. Shuffled right back, yet still finished her race off well for third. Good ground's ideal. Ian Williams won this race last year, and I think Malacana, with any kind of improvement from her reappearance, will win the 4:52 at Chester. And then the next best, I mean, this is a really tentative decision and selection, I have to say, Jess. And I'm going to the Curragh, which kind of suggests how tentative it is. In the 250, a horse called Ice Cold in Alex. He's a 9-year-old sprinter, not usually my go-to. However, he's a 4-time winner at this venue, seems to save all of his best efforts for this place, and he's also just £2 higher than when last successful. The jockey who rode him that day was Jamie Powell, a £5 apprentice. He's back aboard. And actually, last time out, I thought he ran very encouragingly despite finishing 4th. The small field was probably a negative for him then. He likes a good pace to run into. He's a closer that comes from off the speed with a big late kick. And he's got a big field in this 250 at the Curragh. And crucially, a good high draw. So I'll take Ice Cold in Alex in the 250 as my next best.
TC, brave move selecting a horse from a Curragh handicap, especially a sprint, but I'll take it to the Curragh with me and wishing best of luck. It is competitive, but I'm sure that Ross is delighted to see declarations because a horse that you were really hoping to see at Royal Ascot runs this weekend. Take it away.
Yeah, so after getting a bit of a bloody nose at Royal Ascot, I've been looking at the jumps this week and sort of cheered myself up a little bit, and then looked and there's no jump racing on Saturday whatsoever, which dampened my squib rather. But I have found a couple. The 1240 Denrith Diamond for the Millman team, filly I really like. She was an eye catcher on debut at Windsor, finishing very fast, just 2.5 lengths behind He Winces Queen Mary runner-up Relief Rally. I really fancied her next time out at Windsor. She was quiet in the market, which perhaps showed that it was a competitive heat. She was only 4th, but she was 4th behind Chief Mankato, who was well supported before getting taken out the stalls at Royal Ascot. Inquisitively was 4th in the Windsor Stakes, and Sky Wizard, who was 3rd, won next time at Salisbury. So that form has worked out really well. Denrith Diamond then went over to France rather, on softer ground and picked up a decent little prize over there. She comes back half a furlong in trip here, but it's a stiffer track. The ground has had a bit of rain up at Newmarket, and it's good. That would be fine. If it dries out and it's good to firm, that would slightly temper in my enthusiasm. I think she is better with a little bit of cut, but she's a really smart filly. Millman team year on year punch above their weight with these 2-year-olds, particularly with their fillies. I think she's a real nice horse, and I think she'll win the 1240 at Newmarket. And then I am going across to the Curragh, the 4 o'clock. Group 3, and it's Al Riffa. I mean, if you put a horse up as I did in the preview podcast for the St James Palace Stakes on his first start of the season, you're kind of duty bound really to put him up when they're running in a Group 3, 5-runner Group 3. I just think he's a really smart horse. He's a lovely physical by Wootton Bassett. What he did in the Vincent O'Brien National Stakes last year at the Curragh was really impressive. I like him an awful lot. I don't think this looks like a particularly deep race, and I'd be disappointed if he doesn't win this and then to go on to justify my confidence and prove himself to be the best 3-year-old miler of his generation.
Big words. Actually, just touching it, just as we're saying it. Thoughts on Paddington beating Caldine? Made it look like he was by far the better miler. Although I'm sure that Caldine will and the connections will want to take them on again. We weren't too sure about Paddington. We didn't know whether we wanted to believe him or not. Are you a believer now, Ross?
Yeah, I'm getting there. I thought he looked really good, and I don't think he had. Chaldian had any excuses really. I just thought Paddington is looking very progressive, as these Aidan O'Brien colts often are. I'm still convinced he'll be better over 10 furlongs, and if he is, he's going to be really quite a horse.
Yeah, he definitely is. I was really taken by him, and I wasn't necessarily in his camp beforehand. Okay, thank you for your Napa Next Best. Yeah, I must say, so much to pick apart this weekend. A quick word for the Fred Archer Stakes. Not a betting race, just a watching brief, I think. New London is back after a break, was last seen second in the St. Ledger. He's up against Alazi, a horse I've always followed, kind of been a bit of a cliff horse. He's obviously had his problems. He's back after over a year off as well, and they're up against Kamari, and I just think that's quite an interesting race overall, picture-wise. Not a betting prospect, just good to see how those horses fare against each other. My nap is going to be in the Criterion Stakes in the 150 at Newmarket. A couple of weeks ago, I put up Jumbie, who went up and won the John of Gaunt Stakes and proved that 7 furlongs is his trip. He might have just been, he got a very good ride that day, I think. I don't know whether he might just be found out having to give away a penalty to a horse that looks very, very progressive in the shape of Aldari, coming out of handicaps into sort of these listed, sort of borderline listed to group races. I think he's he looked to be even better this time last year than he had ever done. He's another one that's coming off a big break. William Haggas has a big weekend of these horses that he's sort of campaigning to come back after breaks, and Aldari is the one that I'm really looking forward to seeing, and hopefully he'll be given a timely run by Jim Crowley and the same sort of aspect that he's done before, held up off the pace to go away and win the Criterion Stakes. That's the 150, and then I'll go to the 1255 at Newcastle, the Chip Chase Stakes, and quite an interesting race in the fact that we've got El Caballo, who was put up by, I think, Ross and TC, and could only manage third in that Jumbie race. But I like Tiber Flow, only found Creative Floss, who's sadly no longer with us, too good last time at Haydock, but I think he really comes to his own on the synthetics. He's got a really good record on the all-weather. Again, another one for William Haggas, Tom Marquardt on board. He's got course and distance form, and I think he comes into it in a good place, and he's well worth his weight back on this surface in what's quite an open-looking affair. So that is my nap and next best selections, and I think we've gone through it all. Don't forget the same race ACCA, that you can get involved with it, the new SBK feature. We've given our selections. Good luck with whatever yours are, whoever you're going to take a little bit of inspiration from, and I hope that you have a very good, successful, profitable weekend. Good luck to TC, good luck to Ross. Enjoy the weekend, and we'll see you soon.